Now, we don't have a cake here with 100 candles to mark this milestone episode, but we do have something far better. Ambassador Dore is Israel's former ambassador to the UN and has served as a top official at Israel's foreign ministry. He's also advised Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and currently heads up the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I sat down with him recently in Jerusalem to learn more about the apocalyptic ideology that drives the Iranian regime and why pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal is a game changer for the United States. Take a look. We had the announcement by President Trump that the United States is pulling out of that disastrous Iran nuclear deal. Talk about how this agreement was dangerous, not just for Israel, of course, where Iran poses an existential threat to the Jewish state. This was dangerous for the world, including the United States. It was refreshing to see President Trump lay that out.
When Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went to Congress a few years back when the agreement was being negotiated, and he rallied against it, I didn't see him going there just to defend the state of Israel. I saw him defending the whole Middle East. He could have said, we, the peoples of the Middle East, have a problem with this agreement. And frankly, because he's so articulate and because he had such a very clear view of the problems, he was the man to come forward, not the King of Saudi Arabia, not the President of Egypt. It was him. But he wasn't just doing it for us. He was doing it for all the countries here. Now, in terms of the United States, people don't recognize this, but Iran has been at war with America, basically ever since 1979. But there's one incident that caught my eye, and that's in 1983, when the U.S. Marine Corps barracks were bombed in Beirut. The U.S. actually had information that was classified, was later disclosed, that the orders for killing the Marines didn't come from Beirut. They didn't come from Lebanon. There had been a signal sent from Tehran to Damascus, where Iran had an embassy, and from Damascus onward to Baalbek, where the Revolutionary Guards were deployed, and finally to Beirut. And the message was, kill the Marines. This was an order given by the highest levels in the Iranian regime. That was one of many indiscretions, putting it mildly, that Iran was involved in. And Americans died, Europeans died, Israelis died. And they continued to lead the struggle. They continued to lead the cause of terror in the world. You know, people also forget that even more recently, former Attorney General Erick held a press conference in Washington announcing that the United States had just nabbed an Iranian who was involved in trying to recruit in Mexico a Mexican drug cartel to carry out a terror operation in Washington, D.C.
Targeting the Israeli and Saudi embassies.
Well, first and foremost, the Saudi Arabian ambassador who goes to have lunch in a certain prestigious Washington, D.C. restaurant full of U.S. congressmen, and he wanted to have a mass casualty attack there. Now, the Iranian agent just made one mistake. He wasn't speaking actually to a member of the drug cartels as he had thought. He was actually speaking to an agent of the DEA. And therefore he got caught and the US had him. But what did that show? That showed that Iran was prepared to engage in a mass casualty attack in the capital of the US. Some country that is doing something like that is saying very clearly in black and white, I am your enemy. And if I have the capacity to attack you, I will. And that comes after, being involved in the killing of Americans in Iraq repeatedly. That comes after being involved in threats to America around the world.
I think a key point, Ambassador, is the Iranian ideology. A central pillar of that ideology is death to America, calling America the Great Satan. Could you talk about how that anti-Americanism is a central part of the Iranian regime's ideology, which they shape policy around?
The Iranians want to dominate, first of all, Iran, and then the Middle East, and then the world. The Iranians regard their supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as the leader of all Muslims in the world, from Malaysia to Morocco. They're afraid that, young people in Tehran, all they want to do is go to Disneyland. All they want to do is share in the America that you and I are familiar with. And in order to neutralize that attraction, they have to fight America. That's what they're all about.
Okay, the Iran deal is no more, at least from an American perspective. A lot of people in the U.S. are saying, well, we pulled out now, what comes next? What does come next? It's encouraging, obviously, that sanctions will be ramped up against Iran. Where do you think this is heading?
I was an Israeli ambassador to the UN, and I dealt with the UN resolutions dealing with Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. At least then, the first Bush administration made the removal of Iraqi missiles beyond a range of 150 kilometers a necessity, a requirement. But suddenly, a couple years later, Iran, it's all forgotten about. So you got to fix that. That can be fixed in a new agreement in the future. This idea that a disarmament agreement is like a carton of milk, that, after a certain period of time, it expires. The milk goes sour. Well, you can't do that. This isn't a kitchen program. This is about the security of the United States, the security of Europe, the security of the West. Any future agreement, if you put a limitation on Iran, that limitation should last forever. But you're going to have to renegotiate all of this.
Thanks again to Ambassador Dore Gold for joining us, and be sure to check out his team's great work at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Well, coming up after the break, a major issue that we've drawn attention to here on the show is Christian persecution. And right now, an American Christian pastor, a U.S. citizen, is languishing in a Turkish prison for his faith. Folks, this is a very important story. Don't move.